President Biden made some big announcements in cannabis this week. He announced a federal pardon for people convicted of small amounts of marijuana possession. He encouraged state governors to do the same. Now, he doesn't have control to force them to do that. However, the vast majority of marijuana convictions for small amounts of marijuana are state convictions. So really that will be a bigger hurdle and get a lot more people out on the streets for doing something that a lot of us are doing today that's legal in those same states. So much of the Black and brown communities of America have been deeply damaged by the war on drugs, and this is a major first step into righting some of those wrongs. He has requested that the Attorney General begin a process to review the scheduling status of cannabis. Why does that matter? Well, the way drugs are scheduled, so Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, is dictated by the FDA and the DEA. So these are not medical professionals, and that scheduling list dictates whether there is medical value in the different drugs that are listed. So the ask to review the scheduling status of cannabis could be very, very significant if it is removed from Schedule 1 and honestly placed in any other schedule would make it a lot easier for people to be able to benefit medically from the value of cannabis. There's a multitude of medical conditions that have already been legally approved in many states across the US, and this scheduling status is a major hindrance in further moving that needle. The other issue with scheduling is Schedule 1 drugs. So for heroin or cannabis to come off that list, you need to provide medical evidence that there is a need for that product. The big catch is you can't do research on Schedule 1 drugs. So there's no way to fundamentally get off the list unless it is through a directive like the one that President Biden submitted yesterday to ask for a review of the status of cannabis and whether it should be Schedule 1 or lower. Well, currently, within the US drug policy, there are 5 different layers of scheduling status. The first being the most severe. Drugs that are listed as Schedule 1 are drugs that have been deemed to have no medical value whatsoever, to have a high likelihood for addiction or abuse. Currently listed as Schedule 1 drugs are things like heroin and cannabis, which we already know that cannabis has clear medical value. It is legal in states in America with a very long list of the medical conditions with which it can treat. So it is ludicrous that cannabis is still listed as a Schedule 1 drug. Part of the issue is in order to be removed from the Schedule 1 classification, you need to be able to provide medical evidence that the product can be used safely and has medical value. But the loop here is that you can't actually do research on Schedule 1 drugs. So there was no way to be removed from the Schedule 1 list with proof unless it was through a directive like this. So this is a major, major step forward in the industry. Many advocates in cannabis are asking for cannabis to be descheduled, so to not land on any of those 1 through 5 lists, and in fact just be treated like alcohol, for example, which is not on all of those lists, or tobacco, which is also not on any of those scheduled lists. That would really open the door for cannabis to be regulated like tobacco or alcohol or any other consumer good. If it stays on the schedule list, then there will still be some restrictions applied to it. Biden has said in the past that his preference is to move cannabis from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 2 drug. It would say that there is medical value in cannabis, but it would likely still require a prescription. So some of the other drugs that are Schedule 2 are things like codeine, oxycodone, methamphetamines, Ritalin, Vicodin. I mean, pretty serious drugs, which also I would venture to say cannabis shouldn't be on that list. But even just dropping it down the one schedule creates opportunity to do further research, clinical trials, and better understand the impact on cannabis on patients. So even coming off of Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 is a huge win, though most cannabis advocates and folks in the industry will push for it to be descheduled even further or completely removed from those lists.